And you've always lived right here in this space?
In this space? Yeah. This has always been my part.
So this is an accumulation of things.
Too many things. Yeah.
Too many things.
Too many things. Look at the books. They're just spreading like crazy, you know. There's no shelves to hold them. And really, that's why people don't buy books anymore. So.
But would you get rid of your books?
I get rid of them periodically.
You do?
All thrillers go out.
Achha.
I'm an avid thriller reader, so all thrillers go out unless they're very literary thrillers. Other things, books that people have given me which I'll never read but which are lying there, those go out. Picture books, मेरे पास बहुत सारी picture books हैं. They go. हाँ,
What stays? What gets to stay? No questions asked.
What gets to stay? Good fiction, good books of essays, biography, literature, classics, all of those get to stay. Those, and basically books by women, they get to stay. Baki sari jaएं. In Kali's time, I always talk about this book. It is, to me, the most important book we have done so far. It's a book called Sharir Ki Jankari, and it came to us from Rajasthan, from the Women's Development Program in Rajasthan, out of which it grew in a series of health workshops done by many activists in the Women's Development Program. And then the program refused to publish it because they felt it was pornographic, because it showed the woman's body. And everyone in the village laughed at them and said, this is not a realistic book because you never see a naked woman in a village, so how can you have this book? And so they went back, thought about it, and then they came up with this brilliant, ingenious solution of drawing the woman fully dressed, head to toe, odni, choli, lehenga, everything. And then you lift up the little flap on the lehenga and you see how she's made.
Ingenious.
Yeah, it's quite clever, no?
And all the drawings are by these...
All the drawings are by the village women.
Okay.
And here you have a little thing, the body parts then. So all this is kind of discrete. This is even more interesting. This is the menstrual thing. So it shows you, how it starts, what happens. They had tried to do this book in such a way that it could be used by illiterate women. So they had kept the words to a minimum and let the illustrations speak for themselves. I mean, it's the kind of book that, as a feminist publisher, I had dreamt about. And it sort of made you think that a form in which somebody creates a work through which you want to express something, it's not cast in stone, because you can look at it, you can go back, you can rethink it, maybe you come up with something very ingenious like these women did. And in my head, or in our heads as publishers, there are certain fundas you grow up with. A book is written by one author, two authors, maybe three. Here were 75 authors saying, so we are all authors, or sabke naam aayenge kitab pe. How do you deal with that? And because you only think, okay, the book has a cover and the cover is the front, you put the names. How are you going to put 75 names on the front cover? So here are all the 75 authors. We had to put them here. That was one of the conditions of the book, that you'll have to put everybody's name here.
Lovely. And they must have been thrilled when it came out.
They were thrilled. They actually, initially we did 2,000 copies. And before the book had finished printing, they had sold it in all the villages around. They talked to people and we pre-sold it. So in these days when you get pre-orders, 1800 copy unhone bech di thi, so only 200 were left. So we almost immediately had to have a reprint. And we printed thousands of copies of it.
तोड़ तोड़ के बंधनों को देखो बहने आती हैं, तोड़ तोड़ के बंधनों को देखो बहने आती हैं, ओ देखो लोगो देखो बहने आती हैं, ओ देखो लोगो
G-H-I-J-K. K-F-E-N-I 240. Suki 240. It's 1200.
Exact.
Yeah.
What does Zuban translate into in English?
In English?
We were just having this voice,
Ja-
but
Tongue, literally, voice, speech, language.
that's what you're saying. That probably there is no exact word.
Yeah, all of those nice things. And actually, the thing is, when women speak too much or speak out of turn or speak like they're not supposed to, then critically they say Zuban khul gayi. So that's the.
So I have a young budding feminist with me. So the cat book and the history of feminism is for her.
There's another lovely book for a young budding feminist, which is Seeing Like a Feminist. Have you seen that? It's brilliant. Have you heard of Nivedita Menon, who teaches politics in JNU? So it's very good. If you're even for older budded feminists, it's great. This one is from Bangladesh. It's about the 1971 war, but goes back to partition.
It's interesting because so much of it is unknown and not
Yeah.
many people talk about
Talk
it.
about that, yeah.
I mean, it's like it's such an amnesia whether
Yeah.
Nelly or this.
Yeah.
It's just surprising.
It is true. Nelly, there's hardly anything.
There's nothing.
2-3 books, just.
So there are a lot of writers but never been translated. And my mom would tell me like, why don't you do it? I mean, why are you
Why
learning it
don't you?
for?
Yeah, why don't you? You should. So when you translate, bring them to us and let's have a look at them. Okay? वो फ्रांचेस्का और सीनी की किताबें वो देख लिया आपने?
मैं कुछ पुरानी किताबें ढूंढ के लाई हूँ जो राइटर्स की हैं।
हाँ।
तो मैं ये भी जानना चाहती हूँ कि बाकी लोग किस तरह से देखा है स्कॉलर्स ने।
हाँ।
इसलिए भी मैं पढ़ना चाहती हूँ अलग अलग, तो आप मुझे अच्छी बुक सजेस्ट कर सकते हैं।
तो और सीनी की तो आपने देखी हुई हैं, आप कह रही हैं, है ना? और वैसे ओरिजिनल किताबें भी आप पढ़ना चाह रही हैं क्या?
जी मैम।
वो किताब है देवरानी जेठानी की कहानियाँ कहते हैं, तो कुछ सब मालूम है। तो फिर मैं क्या सुझाव?
आपसे ज़्यादा थोड़ी नहीं मालूम। आपकी किताबें पढ़ के उनको
क्योंकि वो है और क्या है?
मैम मुझे एक लंदन यात्रा मिली है।
हाँ।
1887 में वो नहीं 1888 में वो पब्लिश हुई थी।
अच्छा।
हरदेवी लाहौर की थी।
हाँ।
वो लंदन गई थी।
हाँ।
वो चाइल्ड विडो थी।
हाँ।
और फिर वहाँ से लौट के आई तो उन्होंने फिर से शादी की लाहौर के बैरिस्टर से रोशनदान से। तो उनका वो है ट्रैवल कॉम।
वेरी नाइस। वो है आपके
हाँ
पास?
वो है, मुझे एक रद्दी की दुकान पे मिला जिस शहर में
अच्छा।
मैं हूँ। तो
वाह, तो उसको ट्रांसलेट कीजिए। See, my original dream was to be a printer. I started off as a production person, and I loved the relationship with the printing process, with the paper, printing presses. I used to get high on the smell of printing ink. I wanted to have a little printing press, and in those days इतनी सी press होती थी जो आप अपनी टेबल के ऊपर रख सकते थे. And the idea was that I would print political pamphlets for all my friends who were running political campaigns and such like. I went and saw it in some places in England. Somebody was selling one for £100. It was second hand, but I didn't have £100 that time. So publishing became like a replacement for that because it was close to printing but not quite printing. And then the processes of publishing started to get interesting. When I joined Oxford and when I started working as a production person, I was completely hooked. These two other quite nice pictures here which I found.
हाँ sure.
This is me in the OUP days.
You look only about 17 in this.
21 years old, I think it must have been.
Who's that with you?
This is a fellow called Roy Chaudhary who used to work there in the accounts department.
What are you talking about? Accounts?
God knows. But I mean, look at the youthfulness of it. Bachpan gaya sara.
And show me that one.
This is also fairly youthful. They say, Anu, how clearly you can see her face. Yeah. Clearly, you can see I didn't know how to act. Slogans I was good at. हाँ हम भारत की नारी हैं फूल नहीं चिंगारी हैं etc etc हल्ला बोल हर एक चीज पे हल्ला बोल
जोर जोर से बोल हल्ला बोल मिलता किससे हल्ला बोल ना बोले इसके बोल
690 औरतें जलकर मर गई और एक भी केस का फैसला नहीं हुआ कारण यही कि न किसी ने कुछ देखा न सुना न कोई कुछ कह सकता है मैं कह सकती हूँ तू एक औरत है तू अपना घर संभाल बाकी सब हम देख लेंगे.
Early 80s was also the start of the anti-dowry campaign. We had a group called Thrissur. We were very much in the forefront of the anti-dowry campaign, anti-rape campaign. We had a street play. हम सब ने खादी कुर्ते खरीदे हुए थे काले रंग के और वो पहन के हम ये प्ले करते. That was actually the whole, because we had all come into feminism together in a sense. I mean, the university years were years when many of our colleagues and friends got very influenced by the left movement, went underground, joined Naxalbari. So in many ways we were all impacted by the politics of the time. And then the early feminist movement in Delhi, the movement of our generation, this, whatever you call it, the third phase or whatever, grew out of that. So there was, for example, a group of women who started up Saheli. And that was Gauri Chaudhary, Shiba Chachi, Abha Bhaiya. Shiba, for example, without really intending to, became the documentalist by willy-nilly, by photographing, just keeping all her pictures, by doing posters.
This is lovely Satiwala image. Which
Do you remember this?
Of course.
This was like this completely overnight, and there were just 15 of us.
It was in front of the Lal Killa area, no?
Yes, वो रानी सती का मेला
बिल्कुल,
निकलता था ना.
हाँ.
And then the
like
next year we went back much better prepared.
It was a coup. It was something of a coup. And look at these, this is Nandita Haksar and Sujata Madhok and Anjali
Runu, Sharabin,
Runu.
Bharti.
Yeah.
I think the rape one is Karol Bagh.
It's Karol Bagh. It was Ajmal Khan Park. Yeah. It was Ajmal Khan Park, and I remember it. And the cops were there all around us, and we were making those digs at the cops.
What digs were you making at the cops?
Oh, because it was all, the...
Indra tere zamane mein, nari lutti thane mein. It was really, literally, sort of shouting a slogan one moment and pointing the camera the next. And the photographs were not being made from the position of an outsider or someone who was documenting this for anybody else. It was for ourselves. It was to share with women in other parts of the country or in other parts of the world. So it was sharing what is happening. The other was a counter to mainstream media images of women, where you had either the helpless victim or the jewel Maharani. And it was to offer an alternative image to kind of question the stereotypes by offering an image of the militant, the struggling woman, the woman who is actually seeking to change her conditions. Here's Satyarani.
Oh, wow.
This is inside her own home, the kind of private ritual she does on the anniversary of her daughter's death. This sofa becomes quite extraordinary in the sense of...
seat of holding her.
Yeah.
Grief year after year after year. This is an extraordinary image. I love that. Yeah, it's there in the book also, no?
It's one of my favorites. It's Devi and Shanti. This is one I'm also very fond of.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's
This
Appa.
beautiful, this woman was the most incredibly beautiful woman.
And so articulate.
Yeah.
And so this is very much about that very special kind of empathy.
Yeah.
And being able to share those stories which patriarchy actually tries to deny.
Yeah,
I mean,
deny.
there's powerful denial at work. Books, of course, essentially ask for a linear movement. But within the book, you can really deepen and enrich the particular photographic moment, image, however you want to describe it, by contextualizing it in textual histories. So it's also that, you know,
But did
both
you
offer
ever-
their own kind of
Did you ever
possibilities.
have a moment of hesitation about the fact that my images and ultimately the real tension with the book production is at the end of the day the quality of the paper. Tell
I
me.
despair. I mean, it's painful for me right now that this is what's being photographed. I'm dying to go and get a decent print and
which
put
you-
it
which you
there.
should, which you
know,
should,
it's like,
which you should.
its quality is miserable, and I've long sort of. Okay, given the economies of alternative publishing, it's going to be cheap paper, etc. So one knows that, and you're prepared for that. For me, I guess the activist self becomes more predominant and says that the circulation of the image, reaching out within the context of these very important historical narratives, becomes very important.
Actually, the activism was really quite strong. We would talk about dowry and the forms it was taking and where was it coming from. We had no idea. And how could we understand? So we tried to look for books to try and understand. Kuch bhi nahi tha. Because I was in publishing, that's what started it off for me. Thinking, why is there nothing? And then asking the bosses, why don't we do something? But they were not that interested. And for me, that was one of the primary reasons for leaving a job that I really loved. I loved my publishing job. I left OUP August of '78, and I took on my teaching job immediately. And that allowed me to start thinking of the publishing as an option.
June 84. I don't remember the date now, maybe 27th or something, some date. But actually it had started before. We were chatting and talking on the phone and writing and corresponding and talking to people, and we actually started working in June.
In that garage.
In the garage, yeah.
You cut a ribbon.
No, nothing of the kind. We did nothing of the kind. One or other of the cats would have wandered in. There were cats even then. Every single country where feminist publishing began with the movement. It came out of the movement. It didn't come out of the mainstream publishing environment at all. It came out of a political context, a political context in which a movement was very significant, in which the women's movement was very significant. But each of those publishing houses had a very different genesis. It's not that every one of them was like us, not at all. Pandora was part of Routledge, very important feminist press. It was part of Routledge, which was a mainstream publisher, but held cooperatively. Do you see? It's not what Routledge is today. It was very different. Virago was independent, but it had financial backing. The women's press was owned by Naeem Atalla, who was the owner of Asprey's. So it's not as though every single publishing house was sui generis the way we were. That was just two women who set up and had no, had no backing and no fronting either. Two women, always two women. There's another thing. Always two women, almost always two women.
Oh, interesting.
It's always been collaborative. How many were there? There would have been at least 20 at one point, from Egypt and Lebanon to, Australia and North America and Finland. Wonderful little presses in Finland.
These presses are still...
No, none of them is around. None of them. Sadly. All bitten the dust, as they say.
It is quite a big step to take. And to say, okay, I'll just go and do it. It's not that easy to do. And by that time, Ritu had joined me. And we started up, and I still don't know how we did it or what, but I mean, I'm glad they were the two of us, even though we split later, because possibly with just the one person, it may not have happened, Now, the thing is that at all stages, it was a bit of a false economy. Ritu and I were not paying ourselves anything. We were in her garage, which didn't cost us anything. Bijli, pani, sab kuch free mein aa raha tha. So that's what things were like at that time. Gradually, over a period of time, we got a couple of other people working with us, and then the salaries went up, and by that time we were publishing more, and of course then we started to pay rent. But Ritu and I still didn't pay ourselves anything until quite a long time. I think pretty much till Kali closed down.
I have to keep saying that, we are in a very different place. We are a small independent publisher. We are still marginal. Now, working from a marginal space is what, to use that overworked term, is very empowering. It's very empowering to be in the margins.
Why is it empowering?
It's empowering because, as I say, you have nothing to lose. You're already in the margins. What will happen? You'll fall off the margin. Nothing worse can happen. But because you're on the margin, you can take the kind of risk, you can say the kinds of things, you can do the kinds of things that are possible from a marginal space. It's a question of where you see yourself in the world. and where you see your activity in the world. In our case, books. But in your case, films. Let's say, we are all in marginal spaces. There is no difference. After all, Mahesh Bhatt is not making a film on me, or Anurag Kashyap.
Quarter. So yeah.
When we started out in 84, I mean, I knew zero about running a business, zilch about running a business. How to put budgets together, how to do profit and loss analysis. I didn't know any of that. And it was really by learning on the job and sort of process of fits and starts that I managed to pick up some things. But even so, it took me a long time to understand how to read a balance sheet even. What does it mean to have a balance? How do you read it? Because we are not, of course, we might be doing accounts at home and so on, but you're not trained to do accounts like that and to understand what's going on. Now we are 8 of us, sometimes 8.5, sometimes 9. And I am aware pretty much every moment of the day that the lives of these people depend on our collective ability, but my personal responsibility to be able to generate an income which can continue to pay their salaries. And if it cannot be done, then it's really time to think, why are we doing this?
There must have been moments where you felt you can't carry on in this way.
Every day.
Every day.
Not moments, every day. You see, in our case, we are concerned about, say, the next 3 years, because that's how long it takes for a list to develop. The economics of feminist publishing is a very different item, because we are not looking at the annual bottom line. We are looking at whether we will be able to continue over the next 3 or 4 years without going under or without reducing the list. What do you do if you don't have enough money? You produce less books. You produce less books, you sell less. If you sell less, you're not visible in the market. If you're not visible in the market, authors don't come to you. Do you see how it works? If authors don't come to you, don't have books.
If you don't have books?
If you don't have books, you don't publish. If you don't publish, you don't exist.
The other thing that Urvashi said, that in the early years of Kali, she relied upon people like you to buy everything that Kali printed.
That's true.
Did that happen? Did
Yes.
you buy everything?
I bought almost everything. I think I bought everything. I really bought everything, and I bought them. Increasingly, now I get copies from Ritu, for instance, sent me Rashid Jahan, that little account of Rashid Jahan, and when I tried to pay for it, she said, no, it's a pleasure, and she gifted it to me, so it was lovely. And it was nice because I was looking at the jail years of Rashid Jahan. So now I buy them occasionally, now I get them occasionally, but originally I bought all of them. So you'll see Tanika's book is here. Yes. This is Tanika's book. So here, Forging Zoya, Forging Identities. This is also, see, they were doing this. That is, they were writing on the margins. So then this was about Muslim women. And Zoya Hassan edited it. This was one of the things that Kali did. Then there was a lot of stuff on South India, on the caste question that came, for instance. In that sense, I can't imagine women's writing and feminist scholarship without the pioneering work that was done by the feminist presses. They put it on the map, and once they put it on the map, then it became sellable in other ways, and then everybody jumped in, and then everybody published. Recasting Woman, which is in a sense the first book in my column over there, is interesting because that is the book that in some ways marked the emergence of feminist scholarship in India. The range of the essays is actually quite interesting.
This has some very interesting stories about it because Kumkum Sangari and Sudesh Ved commissioned the pieces, both very rigorous editors. And then everything was ready about the book except the introduction. And we were waiting, introduction likhi jaye. Then finally I trapped the two of them in my house. It was summer, and I remember that I had one of the early computers, a thing called an Amstrad. So I got that. I told them, "Tum yahan pe baitho." Kumkum ka bachcha chota sa tha, Dhruv, who's now become a very well-known singer. And I made them endless cups of chai while they wrote the introduction under duress and produced a fantastic, really good introduction. I think one of the early lessons was that don't work with friends if you can help it. It severely strains your friendship, you know.
How silly was it strain?
I mean, I know that by the end of this enterprise, they hated me and I more or less hated them, and it took a long time for the friendship to get back on track because they saw me as this horrible woman and I saw them as these recalcitrant authors, and I thought, I don't want to look after Kumkum's child, but I'm making chai for them. This is not what a publisher does, you know, all of that. But poor things, they produced something, and of course afterwards we became friends again. But it does do that, and I went ahead and did it every time after. With
I was just going to say, many of them are your friends.
Yeah, what to do? I mean, Radha Kumar's book, that history of doing, I used to pitch up at Radha's house with a clipboard every morning, and she would be still asleep. There would be people draped all over her furniture in various states of undress, drunkenness, whatever, and I'd have to shake her awake and say, Radha, chalo kitab likho, aaj ka ye chapter likho, and all of that. So it's a different way of functioning, I guess.
Kolam. This is the first. This is the last. Yeah.
Are these your diaries, in fact?
These are my diaries, yes. Yeah. Then we always had a listing of women's organizations in the country. A complete list at the back of every day. You know that. Pari, look at this. Terrible. Girl with dupatta caught under a pencil. Look at this, all old. Oh, too much sentimental value. I can't tell you how close they are to our hearts, those diaries. Why? Because we were among the first people to introduce women's art. Well, we didn't want to separate any one creative expression from another. We were the first people to ask a dancer to design our logo. She designed so many of our covers. She did a whole diary of kolam for us. If you've seen the women do it, they'll put the rice paste first, like that, very quickly, very deft, 2 minutes.
These diaries you made and gave it to all your friends?
No, we didn't give, we sold. Okay. Women's labor must not be given free. This year, in 97, Aisha Kagal, she used to be a journalist for Times of India, she said, why don't I do a diary of women's poems for you? You know, every single woman said to us, why don't you publish poetry? Now, we didn't publish poetry, we still don't, because it's not easy. It's very difficult to sell poetry, as everyone will tell you. So we said, yeah, but just the poems, there's no visual element in it. So she said, what if I ask Pablo Bartholomew to photograph the women? I said, he'll never do it for us. He was well into another kind of photography altogether. So she said, no, let me ask him. So he was thrilled because he said, I really want to do portraits. So he did. Let me see, where is... here's Ruth. She's the first one. Look at young Ruth. Gauri Deshpande, I must read this poem.
Okay.
No, I must read it. Gauri is, you know, Gauri Deshpande is Iravathi Karve's daughter, poet, also a writer. We published her. We published her novel, Deliverance. So Gauri's poem is called The Female of the Species. And it goes like this. Sometimes you want to talk about love and despair and the ungratefulness of children. A man is no use whatever then. You want then your mother or sister or the girl with whom you went through school and your first love and her first child, a girl, and your second. You sit with them and talk. She sews and you sit and sip and speak of the rate of rice and the price of tea and the scarcity of cheese. You both know that you've spoken of love and despair and ungrateful children. Lovely. So, you know, this Aaka Darya, Kurtalen's famous book, never available in English. And of course, lots of people had been wanting to do it, but she would never let them. Utterly charming, but a bit eccentric. Anyway, one day, I get a call from her. And she says, मैंने सुना है तुमने टेढ़ी लकीर छापी है? So I said, जी, छापी है. She said, तो क्या आका दरिया उससे कम है? I said, नहीं, उससे बिल्कुल कम नहीं है. She said, तो फिर? I said, लेकिन आप किसी को इजाज़त ही नहीं देती हैं तो हम क्या करें? She said, ये तुमको किसने बताया? I said, सभी कहते हैं नियापा कि आप इतराज़ करती हैं और आप किसी को इजाज़त नहीं देती हैं और कोई उसका तर्जुमा नहीं कर सकता है, तो हम कैसे छापें? She said, कब आ सकती हो? I said, कहाँ? अरे मैन्यूस्क्रिप्ट लेने? I said, आप जब बुलाएं मैं आ जाती हूँ. Then she called her maid, Rehana, who really was her companion. अरे रिहाना, वो आका दरिया का जो मैंने तर्जुमा किया था वो सूटकेस है ना? जी आपा है. From a distance you can hear. जी आपा है. I went, I took the contract, I wrote it up, but I told Urvashi, I said, everything's going to happen. She said, nothing lost. So I went, and there she was sitting with this VIP suitcase with this manuscript. And one अरे नहीं वो चैप्टर 17 निकालो, ये नहीं रिहाना, वो तो बहुत पुराना है, नया वाला निकालो जो मैंने बाद में किया उसका निकालो. This went on for about, I don't know, half an hour. I said, एनियापा, दरअसल बात ये कि वो थोड़ा शायद उसको थोड़ा सा रिड्यूस कर सकते हैं हम. हाँ, she said, क्यों नहीं, ये वाला निकाल दो, वो भी निकाल दो. अरे उर्दू में चलता है, अंग्रेजी में इसकी कोई ज़रूरत, ये भी निकाल देना, वो भी निकाल देना. And she signed it. You couldn't believe it. There it is. I can't remember the year now. What was it? 96.
आपको ये ऑथर का सिग्नेचर चाहिए कि कोई ज़रूरत नहीं? सिग्नेचर ऑथर का चाहिए? बिल्कुल. नहीं, आई एम नॉट फोर्सिंग हिम. ये सीइंग लाइक अ फेमिनिस्ट खत्म हो गई, नीचे थी ना 2-3 सीइंग लाइक अ फेमिनिस्ट, वो लाल रंग की ऐसे नहीं है.
I mean, did you expect the success of this book when you wrote it? Absolutely not. I mean, I'm an academic. This is my 5th book or something, and academic books have a certain small market. They don't get reviewed in newspapers. They have their own life. I certainly didn't expect this. Of course, this was written in a different way, it's written in a different style. And I was really excited that Urvashi decided to pick it up as one of the books that Zuban would co-publish. For me, the idea of a South Asian feminism was really produced by feminist publishing, by Kali for Women, by Ritu and Urvashi. And the idea that, so you get to see Pakistani writers' works in India, Nighat Saeed Khan, you see a combined work of Nighat and Kamla on partition, and you see this kind of thing and you suddenly realize that there are conversations going on across borders. So that was, I think, very exciting that was a very exciting idea to engage with, that it's not just Indian feminism but South Asian feminism that questions borders and challenges borders. And that was definitely, I think, feminist publishing very self-consciously produced that idea of a South Asia.
So the literature which I am actually quite, I feel very personally touched by, and that is the material, that's the books that were on Bangladesh. Now, one of the things that Bangladesh was, the women's movement in Bangladesh very early got involved with was in documenting the violence of 71 from a gendered perspective. So women's groups went off and did oral testimonies of women that they had access to. The work was so raw and overpowering for people that Shaheen, who was part of this group, actually talks about the fact that the difficulties of handling this, confronting this reality, led her to thinking about writing creatively on 71, and that is what led to the novel that she wrote called Tarash.
এই মিউজিয়ামে আসলে অনেক কিছুই জানার সুযোগ হয়, যারা 71 সম্পর্কে বিশেষ জানে না বা দেখে নাই সেটাও। এখানে আসলে কি তোমার দেখার সবগুলো মাঝখানে দাঁড়ালে মানে চারদিকে মনে হয় যে আমি একটা যুদ্ধের মাঝখানে বোধহয় আছি, ওই ফিলিংসটা মাঝে মধ্যে লেখার ক্ষেত্রে দরকার হয়ে পড়ে। এই ছবিটা বিশেষ করে, হ্যাঁ, মানে ওটা নিয়ে অনেকেই বিভিন্ন রকমের কথা, একটা প্রশ্ন উঠেছে এর মধ্যে। আমি নিজেকে যদি ভাবি, আসলে কি আমি চাইতাম যে আমাকে এভাবে দেখানো হোক, হ্যাঁ। আবার মানে অনেকে বলতে শুনেছি যে ভয়াবহতাটা, যুদ্ধের ভয়াবহতাটা বোঝানোর জন্য দেখানোর দরকার আছে। তো মুখ ঢেকে ফেলার একটা হলো যে হয়তো নিজেকে তো বুঝতেই পারছিল যে সে রেপড হয়েছে এবং তার অবস্থাটা কি হবে সমাজে, পরিবারে, তো সেই জায়গার থেকে কাজটা করেছে। আর আমার না এখানে একটু অন্যরকম লাগে, কেন মানে একটা ফোর্স মনে হয় না, যে এমনভাবে টেনে ধরে আছে যে তোমরা চাইলেও আমাকে দেখতে পারবে না। ওরাল হিস্ট্রি প্রজেক্টের তো রিপোর্ট আকারে হচ্ছিল, তারপর ওইখানে গ্রামের 8-10 জন মেয়ে কিনে রাখা হতো, ওরা তো শাড়িটা তো রাখতেই দিত না, হ্যাঁ, আর পানি চাইলেও দিত না, তো ওইরকম। আর কাপড় চোপড়টা নিয়ে বেশি ওদের ইয়ে ছিল, যে ওই একজন বলছিল যে আমি একেবারে পুরো দমে বিবস্ত্র। বইটা লেখার মানে ইন্সপিরেশন যদি বলা হয় পোস্ট ওয়ারটাই ছিল, যে দেশ স্বাধীন হয়েছে, মুক্তিযোদ্ধারা বীরের বেশে ঢুকছে আর মেয়েদের লুকিয়ে ফেলা হচ্ছে, মানে একদমই উল্টা ট্রিটমেন্টটা আর কি। মানে ওইটাই বোধহয় প্রথম নাড়া খাওয়ার জায়গা ছিল। আমি আসলে বুঝতে পারছিলাম না যে আসলে কি লিখতেছি আর লেখাটা হচ্ছে কিনা। ওইরকম একটা পর্যায়ে আমার মনে হয় যে ফেরদৌস আপাকে আমি প্রথম কয়েকটা চ্যাপ্টার
I remember just lying on my bed and on my stomach and reading it with my feet up in the air, lying on my stomach, and I thought, my God, this is unbelievable. Because also we had felt that this story had not been told at all. At all. And you know, for us it really spoke because we were women of that age. I mean, I was an 18-year-old in 1971, and this was really a story that could well have been mine, you know, like Mary's story. Mary is me, you know, in many, many ways.
You know, the last time when we spoke about the scene in the jeep when Mariam is being gang raped on the way.
On the way.
And we discussed your use of one particular word.
Yes.
Which was the malodorous penis.
I think the original said durgandhomoy. It was a very strong adjective. I wanted to use a strong, hard word to describe that adjective. I don't think in literature any woman has written so frankly, so candidly of the act of rape. Shaheen, I think, almost attempts a kind of a Brechtian alienation, because then she uses very conventional literary high-flown language and then sort of breaks it in some way.
বইমেলার মধ্যে একজন এক্স আর্মি, সে ফ্রিডম ফাইটার, প্রচুর মুক্তিযুদ্ধের বই সাজিয়ে টাজিয়ে একটা স্টল করেছে। তা আমি ওইটার মধ্যে ঢুকতে গিয়ে দেখলাম তালাশটা নাই। তা আমি জানতাম না ওনারই দোকান। তা আমি বললাম যে তালাশ বইটা তো দেখছি না। বলে কি, আমি জানি আপনি লেখক, কিন্তু এই বই আমরা বইয়ের স্টলে রাখি না। এই বই পড়ে কি শিখবে ইয়াং জেনারেশন? নারী পুরুষের, শোনেন ফেরদৌস আপা, নারী পুরুষের সম্পর্ক কি হয় আমরা সবাই জানি, এগুলো এইভাবে লেখার দরকার আছে? আমি রেপের বিষয়টা সে নারী পুরুষ সম্পর্ক হিসেবে। তারপরে মাসখানেক পরে আমি একটা ইমেল পেয়েছি উর্বশীর, যে বইটা ওদের পছন্দ হয়েছে, ও ট্রান্সলেশন করতে চায়। এটা ওইভাবে শুরু হয়েছিল। সপ্তম দিনে টুকি ও মরিয়ম মানুষের ভবিষ্যৎবাণীর সংকীর্ণ সীমানা অতিক্রম করে যায়। আর তখনই দেখে অনুরাধা সাদা রুমাল নেড়ে দূরের এক বেলাভূমি থেকে হাতছানি দিয়ে তাকে ডাকছে। মুর্দার গাম্ভীর্য ঝেড়ে ফেলে মরিয়ম এখন বেশ উৎফুল্ল। এদিকে তরতর করে চালকহীন নৌকাটা পৌঁছে গেছে অনুরাধার নিকটে। ইস, কতদিন পর দেখা। পানিতে ভাসতে ভাসতে অনুরাধার সারা গায়ে শ্যাওলা পড়ে গেছে। অনুরাধাও প্রাণবন্ত সেই কিশোরী। মরিয়ম নিজেকে নিজে দেখতে পাচ্ছে না। তার সামনে পেটিকোট ব্লাউজ ছাড়া খালি একটা শাড়ি পরনে টুকি বেগম, চৌধুরী বাড়ির কাজের মেয়ে। বন্দি হওয়ার বয়সে আবার ফিরে গেছে। শাড়ির আঁচলটা সে মুঠো করে ধরে আছে মুখের উপর। পৃথিবীর আকাশে সূর্য অস্ত যাচ্ছে। টুকির চোখে ভাসছে ফেলে আসা সেই স্থলভূমি, যা রক্তিম দিগন্তে মাথার চুলের মতো ভাসছে। অনুরাধা সেদিকে তাকিয়ে উচ্ছ্বসিত গলায় বলে, কি সুন্দর আমাদের দেশটা। টুকির মুখ থেকে আঁচল সরে যায়, যে দেশের জন্য আমরা শরীরের রক্ত দিছিলাম।
I'm really glad that we did the book, and when I went hunting for it, I really had my heart in my mouth thinking this is the kind of story that all the big publishers pick up, and I'm not at all sure that we will be able to do it or that we'll even get a look in, you know. And I was really surprised to find that koi bhi nahi tha wahan par. Maybe people hadn't seen the story, or maybe, but anyway, so the other thing is that the money earned from Baby's book, you know, the publisher gets a share of the money because we negotiate all the contracts and everything. It really meant a lot to us, because even though we may have an image of being very successful and all of that, but we are, like all independent publishers, struggling the whole time. And it's a struggle to make every book work, and it's a struggle to make ends meet. And Baby's book did something for us economically which no other single book had done. It gave us a good amount of money from that single book, and I find it particularly pleasing that a poor marginalized woman, a domestic worker, can turn the fortunes of a publishing house, or at least impact them positively. So for me, for that reason also, this book is really important. It's like it marks a moment when things began to change in many ways for us.
नमस्कार। मेरा तो लिखना 2000 में शुरू किया था। मैं दिल्ली कैसे आई? मैंने दिल्ली लिखने के लिए नहीं आई थी, मैं बच्चे को पालने के लिए आई थी। मैंने बच्चों को एक अच्छा इंसान बनाना चाह रही थी, और उसके बजाय मैं जहाँ से आई हूँ वहाँ पे मेरे हस्बैंड से बहुत तरह तरह से बात होती थी। तो एक दिन मैं 3 बच्चों को लेके मैं दिल्ली आ गई। उससे पहले मेरा दोनों भाई आ गया था। मैंने सोचा था जो भी होगा वहीं से देखा जाएगा, कुछ तो जो भी कुछ होगा।
अच्छा, मुझे थोड़ा तर्जमा करने दो अंग्रेजी में
बिल्कुल।
जो लोगों के लिए। So, for those of you who are not Hindi speaking, Baby has described how being in a difficult marriage, she took her 3 children and walked out of the marriage and came from Calcutta to Delhi. And eventually somebody helped to find her a job in the house of a professor, who then took an interest in her as a human being, which surprised her, because generally as a domestic you are not noticed as a human being, and who encouraged her to first read and then to write, and that is how she came to her writing.
रोज़ रात को मैं पूरा दिन बच्चे के साथ घर पे कामों पे मैं बिजी रहती थी। बच्चे के साथ भी मैं लिखने बैठ जाती थी, बच्चे के साथ भी मैं काम करती थी रात को बैठ के। जो भी मतलब टाइम मिलता था मुझे, ज़्यादातर रात को ही मैं करती थी। जैसे कि ये 12-13 साल की बच्ची है वो खुद, और उसके पेट में बच्चा। ये कैसे दुनिया है हमारा, किस दुनिया में हम जी रहे हैं? हाँ, इस तरह की बात मैं अभी सोचती हूँ। वो चीज़ बेबी ने क्यों सहा? हाँ, तो ये बच्चे बाहर खेल रहे हैं, जो आपने शायद किताब में पढ़े होंगे। डांगुली एक खेल होते थे, छोटा सा एक गोली और बड़ा सा एक डंडा ऐसा होते थे, गुल्ली डंडा जिसे कहते हैं। तो वो बच्चे बाहर खेल रहे हैं और वो बेबी बाहर खड़े होके, गेट के बाहर खड़े होके देख रही है, बच्चे खेल रही है। तो वो बच्चे खेलते खेलते वो जो गोली है वो बेबी के पैर के पास आके गिर पड़ा। तो वो देख के बेबी को भी एक मन में वो हो रहा जो हम भी खेले जाके। तो वो इतना बड़ा पेट लेके वो बच्चे के साथ खेलने गए। तो आसपास का जो सारे लेडीज़ लोग हैं वो देख रहे हैं और आपस में बातचीत कर रहे हैं और हंस रहे हैं, जो देखो माँ बनने जा रही है और बच्चे के साथ खेल रही है। পড়ো। কথার কোনো জবাব না দিয়ে জানালার ধারে গিয়ে আকাশের দিকে তাকিয়ে বেবির মায়ের কথা মনে পড়ল। বেবির মা তো চেয়েছিল যে ছেলেপিলে লেখাপড়া শিখে মানুষের মতো মানুষ হোক, কিন্তু সেটা আর হলো কই? মা তো একেবারেই লেখাপড়া কিছুই জানতো না, কিন্তু লেখাপড়া কি জিনিস সেটা ঠিক জানতো, যার জন্য যতদিন বেবিদের মা বেবিদের কাছে ছিল ততদিন ছেলে মেয়েদের পিছনে পড়া নিয়ে সব সময় লেগে থাকতো। মা যদি আজ বেঁচে থাকতো, শুনতো বা দেখতো যে ওর বেবি এখনও লেখাপড়া করতে চায় বা করছে, তাহলে আজ তার মা কতই না খুশি হতো। বেবি আকাশের দিকে তাকিয়ে যেন তার মায়ের সাথে কথা বলতে চাইছে। মা, তুমি একটিবার এসে দেখে যাও, আমি এখনও লেখাপড়া করতে চাই। আমার ছেলে মেয়েকে আমি লেখাপড়া শিখিয়ে ভালো করে বড় করতে চাই। মা, তোমার আশীর্বাদ যেন আমার
ये कहा गया कि आप क्या पहचान देंगी अपने बारे में, क्योंकि एक डोमेस्टिक वर्कर का पहचान क्या होता है। ऑब्वियसली राइटर इज़ अ लग्जरी, मतलब ठीक है किस जगह से उठे, लेकिन वो अपने आप अगर आपकी वो पहचान बन जाती है तो वो एक बड़ी पहचान हो जाती है फिर समाज के अंदर। तो उसके बारे में आपके विचार क्या हैं, वो मैं जानना।
देखिए, मैं लिखती हूँ, घर का काम भी करती हूँ, और मैं जो लिखती हूँ लोग मुझे क्या सोचते हैं, ये एक राइटर सोचते हैं या घरेलू काम का जी औरत सोचते हैं, उसमें मेरा कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ता, उसमें मेरा कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ता। और आप लोगों का नज़रिया जो मेरे ऊपर बदल गया, एक इतना बड़ा राइटर है, वो आप लोगों का सोच है, मेरा नहीं। मैं अगर खुद को राइटर समझ लगूंगी, मतलब क्या बोलूं? मुझे क्या पूछ रही? मैं अगर खुद को उस तरह के समझने लगूं, राइटर समझने लगूं, तो शायद मैं अच्छा नहीं लिख पाऊंगी। और मैं लिखती हूँ मेरे लिए नहीं, उन सब औरत के लिए जिन लोगों का ये जो पोस्टर लगा हुआ है, मैं उन लोगों के लिए लिखती हूँ। मैं अपने बारे में लिखती हूँ, लेकिन मेरा कहानी उनमें है, उनका कहानी मेरे में है।
once Kali became Zuban and Women Unlimited, what happened after that for you? How was it suddenly to be doing, running your own production house in a way, totally different after so many years together?
It was like single parenting. Absolutely. Just taking time off, it was never an issue. So obviously then when you're on your own, the entire responsibility is individual, singular. But then of course so are lots of other things to compensate. That is, I don't have to say, I don't have to take anyone's permission, we don't have to agree about everything. If I want to take a risk, I can. If Urvashi wants to go into children's books, she can. She doesn't have to listen to me saying, no, it's too expensive, we can't afford color, we can't do this, we can't do that.
And yet that was the moment when, at least for me, and I think Ritu too felt that. Because in the middle of all our battles, we actually expressed surprise jointly at this. That we felt so validated because दुनिया भर से हमको चिट्ठियाँ आती थी, फ़ोन कॉल्स आते थे, कभी कभी वो ईमेल शुरू ही हुई थी, उस वक्त फैक्स आते थे, ईमेल आते थे कि why is this happening? This is so, it has been so important for us. I mean, we were getting people from the States, people from Latin America writing saying Kali has been such an important thing and why is it falling apart? And it was like, it was something they all felt they owned, which is what we wanted to make it, but we never had any notion that we had succeeded in that. So, as you're sort of hurtling towards your death, you are seeing that actually you've done something, you're feeling validated with something. And so that moment in my head is always mixed up with this sense of impending doom and this wonderful feeling that every day you'd get something new and somebody would say, you've been so important to us, I've grown up on your books, I've cited your books, my studies have been informed by Kali books and so on. So that moment really stands out in my head, and it stands out in my head because of course, again, we felt we were hurtling towards our doom, but it was anything but. It was actually a release into something completely different. So with hindsight, then you see things a little bit differently also.
It was the right thing at the right time. That's all it was. That's why I say it's not possible to recreate. Even we could not recreate it. It's just not possible. You don't have that confluence that, that is a part of the moment. You do something different. You never want to replicate. Do something different. Do something else. Do something that's appropriate to this time. That's why I have no regrets. I mean, these are just statements of fact. No, meaning one can, looking at those diaries, I keep thinking, oh God, what a nice time we had, and, such fun, and so carefree. We never worried about where the money was coming from. Never. We never thought, अरे अगले साल क्या करेंगे?